That was the moment I understood what my daughter had actually done. Not the moment she told me I needed a little help. Not when she packed my overnight bag, the small blue one I use for short trips, and told me it would only be a few days. Not even when I sat in the passenger seat of her car watching my house disappear in the side mirror. The hydrangeas I'd planted 23 years ago still blooming purple along the front walk. No, it was when I asked the woman at the front desk if I could use the phone to call my friend Lorraine, and the woman smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and said, "Oh, we'll get you settled in first, sweetheart." Sweetheart, I am 79 years old. I taught 6th grade English for 31 years. I have filed my own taxes since 1974, managed this household through a husband's illness and death, raised 2 children, and refinanced my mortgage twice without anyone holding my hand. And this woman, who could not have been older than 32, called me sweetheart and reached for my purse. "We like to keep valuables secure during the adjustment period," she said. I held onto my purse. "I'm not adjusting to anything," I said. "I'm here temporarily." She smiled again. Same smile. "I should tell you how this started, because it didn't start the way you might think. It didn't start with a fight or a threat or anything dramatic at all. It started with a casserole. My daughter. I'll call her by what she is, my daughter. Though some days these past months the word has felt foreign in my mouth. She started coming around more often last spring. Every Sunday with a casserole dish wrapped in a dish towel, a bottle of sparkling water, sometimes flowers. She would sit across from me at the kitchen table and ask how I was sleeping, how my hip felt, whether I'd been driving at night. I thought she was being loving. I thought, finally, after years of distance and busyness and the way adult children sometimes drift, she was coming back to me. I told her about the hip honestly. It had been bothering me since February. Some mornings I needed a few minutes before I could walk without stiffness. I mentioned that I had slipped on the back porch steps in January. Nothing serious, no fall. Just a moment where I grabbed the railing harder than usual. I told her these things because she was my daughter and I trusted her. I understand now that I was describing vulnerabilities. I understand now that she was taking notes. By June, she was bringing her husband. He is a man I have never warmed to, even at the wedding. He has a way of standing in rooms like he's appraising them. That June afternoon, he stood in my living room with his hands in his pockets and turned slowly, looking at the crown molding, the fireplace, the bay window that faces the backyard, and I had a feeling I didn't have the vocabulary for yet. "This is a beautiful home," he said. "Yes," I said. "It is." He smiled. "Must be a lot to maintain. I manage." He nodded slowly, like I'd said something that confirmed a theory. My daughter called 3 days later and started talking about a place she'd visited, a transitional care community, she called it. "Beautiful grounds," she said. "Dining room, activities, a pool." "Just for a short stay," she said, just while her husband looked into some options for the house, by which she meant, she told me carefully, that they wanted to help me explore whether the house was still the right fit. Was there something smaller might suit me better at this stage? I said no. Clearly and directly no. But she came back. And she brought a folder. Inside the folder were papers from a doctor I had seen once, 8 months earlier, for a routine checkup. He had noted that I'd seemed occasionally forgetful during our visit, a characterization that baffled me, because what I had actually done was ask him to repeat himself when he spoke while facing away from me. Still, that note was in the folder. There were also printed articles about aging in place risks and a pamphlet for the facility with photographs of women who looked serene and well-dressed sitting in sunlit rooms. "Mom," she said, "I'm worried about you. We both are." I looked at her across the table, at her hands folded on top of that folder, at the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I said I would think about it. What I was actually thinking was, something is wrong here. But I am a reasonable woman, and I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that children sometimes become overbearing out of genuine love. I told myself the folder was clumsy, not calculated. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, she arrived at 8 o'clock with her husband and a suitcase and said she'd made the arrangements. "Just 1 week," she said, "just to try it, to give herself peace of mind. I don't fully understand, even now, why I got in the car. Part of it was exhaustion. Part of it was that I had lived alone for 11 years since Harold died, and there are moments, if I'm honest, when the house is very quiet and very large, and the thought of someone somewhere being worried about you is not entirely unwelcome. Part of it was that I had not yet understood what was actually happening. I took my purse. I did not take the suitcase my daughter had packed. I packed my own, smaller bag, the blue one, because I told myself I would be home by the weekend. The facility was called Meadowbrook Gardens. It was clean, I will say that. The floors were polished and the common areas had fresh flowers, and the staff spoke in pleasant, modulated voices. My room had a window that looked out over a courtyard with a fountain. None of that changed what it was. By the end of the first day, I had already noticed things. The phone in my room did not have an outside line. When I asked about this, I was told that I could use the main phone at the nurse's station during appropriate hours. When I asked what those hours were, I was given a laminated card with a schedule that listed phone access between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, weekdays only. I asked about my cell phone. I had given it to my daughter to charge in the car. She hadn't brought it in. When I asked a nurse about this, she said she'd look into it. She did not look into it. I went to sleep that first night with a very specific and quiet feeling. Not panic. Something more like clarity, actually. The kind that arrives when you stop explaining away things that don't make sense. On the second day, I called my daughter from the nurse's station. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm and rushed. "Mom, how is it? Isn't it lovely?" "Where is my phone?" I said. "It's here, it's charging. I'll bring it when I visit." "When are you visiting?" A pause. "This weekend, maybe." "We're just so busy right now, Mom, with, well, you know." I did not know. With what? I did not know. With what? Another pause. Shorter this time. "Just some paperwork, don't worry about it." I hung up and stood at that desk for a moment and thought about what kind of paperwork my daughter and her husband might be attending to that was keeping them too busy to visit me. I thought about the way he had stood in my living room turning slowly. I thought about that folder. I asked the receptionist, a young woman named Autumn, who was genuinely kind to me throughout all of this, if I could look at my intake paperwork. She said she'd need to check with the administrator. I said I'd wait. I sat in the chair across from her desk for 45 minutes until the administrator appeared, a brisk woman who clearly had other things to do. "We don't typically review intake documents in reception," she said. "I'd like to see what I signed," I said. "You signed a standard admissions agreement. What were its terms?" She looked at me the way people sometimes look at elderly women who ask direct questions, as though the directness itself is a symptom of something. "I'll have someone bring a copy to your room," she said. No one brought anything to my room. On the third day, I started talking to the other residents. There was a woman down the hall, a retired pharmacist, sharp as a tack and furious as a wasp, who had been there for 6 months longer than her family had told her she would be. There was a man in the common room who had asked 3 times to see an attorney and been told 3 times that he needed family authorization to make outside calls. Family authorization. To use a phone. Let me say that again. Family authorization to use a phone. I went back to Autumn at the front desk. "I need to make a phone call," I said, "to my attorney." She glanced toward the administrator's office. "I understand the policy," I said quietly, "but I also understand no residential facility in this state can legally prevent a competent adult from contacting legal counsel. If you have questions about that, I'm happy to wait while you confirm it." Autumn looked at me for a moment. Then she turned her monitor slightly away from the office door and slid the desk phone across to me. "I'll give you some privacy," she said, and walked to the end of the hallway. I called my estate attorney. "His name is a matter between him and me, but I will tell you he has handled my affairs for 16 years, and he answered on the second ring. I told him where I was. I told him I believed something was being done with my property without my consent. I told him I had not authorized any sale or transfer, and that I needed him to check immediately whether any documents had been filed or were pending." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Stay where you are. Don't sign anything. I'll call you back at this number within the hour." He called back in 40 minutes. "There's a listing," he said. "Your house went on the market 4 days ago." I sat with that for a moment. 4 days ago. 2 days after I arrived here. Listed by whom? He told me. It was my daughter's husband's name on the listing paperwork. And there was a document, a power of attorney, dated 3 months ago, with what purported to be my signature on it. I had never signed a power of attorney. I knew with the certainty of someone who has signed her name to important documents many times across many decades that my signature had been forged. "What do I do?" I said. "My attorney told me what to do. He had already, in those 40 minutes, contacted the county recorder's office and placed a notification of disputed ownership on the property. The listing could not legally close with that flag on the title. He was also, he told me, already drafting a request for an emergency hearing. Can they actually keep me here? I asked. No, he said. Not if you're a competent adult who wants to leave. Walk out the front door. Just like that. Just like that. They can recommend. They cannot detain. I thanked him. I hung up. I sat for one more moment at that reception desk and looked out the glass doors at the parking lot and the road beyond it, shimmering a little in the summer heat. Then I picked up my purse, walked to the elevator, went back to my room, picked up my blue overnight bag, and walked back out. Autumn was back at her desk. She looked up. I'm leaving, I said. Of course, she said. Would you like me to call someone? I have a call, I said. Thank you for the use of the phone. She nodded, and I thought I saw, very briefly, something like satisfaction cross her face. The quiet kind, the kind that passes quickly. I called a taxi from outside. I sat on a bench near the front entrance while I waited, in the shade of a large oak, and I watched the fountain in the courtyard through the glass. And I thought about the hydrangeas in front of my house, and I thought about hydrangeas in front of my house, and I thought about Harold, who always said that the most important thing he'd ever done in his professional life was read every word of every document before he signed it. He would have had things to say about all of this. The taxi came. What followed was not quick or simple, and I won't pretend it was. There were weeks of legal proceedings. There was a contested hearing in which my daughter sat across a conference table from me and would not look at my face. There was a forensic document examiner who confirmed that the signature on the power of attorney was not mine. The pen pressure was wrong. The way I looped the stem of my R was wrong. Little things that are deeply personal to anyone who has written her own name for 79 years. My son-in-law, it turned out, had done this before. Not with me. A previous instance had been settled quietly, which is the way those things sometimes go when families are embarrassed and attorneys are expensive. This time it did not settle quietly. The house did not sell quietly. The listing was pulled within the week. The disputed ownership flag stayed on the title until the matter was fully resolved, and when it was resolved, the title remained exactly where it had always been, with me. I will not tell you the exact outcome of the legal case against my son-in-law, because that is still partly a matter of public record and partly a matter I prefer to hold close. I will tell you that he is no longer in a position to do this to anyone else. My daughter and I have not spoken since the conference table. I have thought about this more than I expected to. I have tried to understand what she told herself, what story she constructed in which this was something other than what it was. I haven't arrived anywhere satisfying. Some things don't resolve into understanding. They just become part of what you carry. I planted new flowers along the front walk this spring. Not hydrangeas this time. I decided I wanted something different, something that was mine in a new way. I chose black-eyed Susans, which are hardy and bright and don't require much from you. I also called an elder law attorney, a different one, someone who specializes specifically in these situations, and I spent an afternoon with her going through every document related to my estate. My actual power of attorney is now held by my friend Lorraine, who has been my friend for 40 years, and who, when I told her what had happened, said only, "I always thought he had dead eyes." She wasn't wrong. I tell this story not because I want sympathy, though I'll accept it if you're offering. I tell it because I know I am not the only one. I have since connected with 2 other women from that facility, through channels I won't detail here. Women whose families made similar decisions about their lives and their properties, and their ability to understand what was happening to them. Both of those women are fine now. One of them is taking a painting class. The other just got a new dog. We are not confused. We are not fragile. We are not decorative objects to be relocated while someone else decides what to do with the things we've spent our lives building. We are women who know how to use a telephone. Tell me in the comments, have you, or someone you love, ever had someone try to make decisions about your life without asking? I want to hear from you.